Move over, Gilbert Grape. It's time for someone else to get eaten. And then we travel to the Netherlands to take a look at a bizarre story that starts off on an unassuming May afternoon, when the kids of this town begin telling their parents that child molesting clowns are snatching them off the street. The townspeople have to decide, are the children lying or are they telling the truth? And this town has become dominated by Satan-worshipping sex fiends. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. Hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. This is a bit of a wacky episode. The second story I had recorded for yesterday's episode, and it was 55 minutes long. Even with some good editing, it's still going to be really long. So I'm moving it to today's episode. So that means I'm not going to have a lot of time to tell a first story. You know me, I always like to tell two to balance it out, especially because the second story is pretty dark, right? I mean, as you could imagine, considering the subject matter. So we're going to go ahead and roll right into this. We're going to have Aaron C., our legacy Patreon supporter from yesterday, come back in and join us. Woohoo, yeah, we just want to come in. Hey, man, I already recorded that segment, and I already said your name. Come on in, buddy. Come on in. You know, it is always hard picking who is going to be the wacky pilot when we have such disturbing stories. But Aaron C. has been a longtime supporter of the show, legacy Patreon supporter. That is why he is going to be our captain or pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the show financially through the Patreon or the merch store, I totally understand. I really do. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. That is how you can help the show grow. Let's go ahead and get this party started. Aaron, I'm going to toss you the keys to the Jason jet ski. Everyone climb on board. We make a human pyramid on his back. Don't make jokes about jet skis or any. This episode's depressing. Yeah, the second half. Let me do this first story. It's also, I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of depressing, but I don't know how true it is. It's a conspiracy that just popped up recently. So let's have a little bit of fun so far. Everyone climb on top of Aaron C. We're all tickling him. As he fires up the Jason jet ski, we're leaving behind Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Why don't you jet ski us all the way out to a meatpacking plant? We get to this meatpacking plant, and I'm a construction worker. No, not that. What are the guys who work in meat packing plants called? I'm a meat man. That was my real job this whole time. I finally doxed myself. I go, hey guys, let me show you to my office. Don't mind the entrails on the floor. They're burying up the last health inspector who didn't take the bribe. I lead you to my office. It's hermetically sealed, so it doesn't smell. We don't smell death. The blood can't get into the office. I sit down, I put my big bloody boots on the desk, blood's flying everywhere. I'm like, the peacefulness of my office. I go, you know, I've always been a meat man. My dad was a meat man, and his dad before him. I worked in the meat packing plant my whole life. But times are tough. Times are tough nowadays. And you look at me and you go, yeah, you know, inflation. And I go, nah, not inflation. And you go, well, you know, not a lot of employees around. Remember that episode you did where you said 10, 20 million people died of COVID and they fudged the numbers down so we didn't panic? There's just millions of people no longer working in the United States. And it has nothing to do with that either. And you go, well, I mean, what is it? Is it like climate change? Are you worried about like the cows dying off or evolving too quickly? They basically evolve and they start beating us up. Hooves become fists. I go, no, that does keep me up at night. Now that you brought that up, I am very scared. Eventually, our livestock will evolve, and we won't be able to slaughter them in mass anymore. Pigs will have armored skin. Cows with 5 stomachs. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been discussing the evolution of livestock for many years, but I don't think that day is now. We actually have a deeper concern. If you notice, look out the window here. Look at the meat factory plant. And you look, and it's just blood and guts everywhere. And I go, yeah, it's pretty gross. It's pretty gross, honestly. I probably should stop bribing the health inspector and use that money to hire people to clean up. But I'm going to tell you this. You think that's disgusting, and you're right. It's unhealthy and possibly several illegal code violations. But I'm going to tell you something. That pile of waste that we turn into hot dogs used to be 10 times higher than it is right now. And you're like, oh, it's disgusting. And I go, you see over there? That's where we take beef and turn it into ground beef. You look over and there's a couple employees running over just a slab of meat with a lawnmower. I go, you didn't know, that's how they get it so tiny. They lawnmower it up. But I'm going to tell you, I got 3 guys running over those slabs of beef, turning it into ground beef. I used to have 20 guys doing that. But what happened was I have less beef to ground. So I got to let a bunch of them go. I used to have 20 pallets of pig anus in this factory alone. And now look at it. I'm down to a single box. We're facing serious times here, and you're like, what is the point of all this? And I slam the desk and I go, the point is, have you noticed that food is more expensive than it used to be? You go, yeah, because inflation. That was the first thing that I guessed. And I go, no, that's just a cover-up. The reason why food is more expensive is because human trafficking is down. Less people are being human trafficked than any other time in recent history. And you're like, so you hired slaves there? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Are you admitting that you personally human trafficked people to work at the meatpacking plant? And I go, no, that probably would have been better than what I'm about to say. So this is the conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy theory from a supposed insider at a meatpacking plant. Meat distribution is where he works. It's a very simple sentence. He posted one sentence online the other day, and I chuckled when I read it, but I keep thinking about it. I don't know how true it is. It may not be true at all. I may have done that whole intro, and then there's nothing to this. It may be kind of true, or it may be totally true. We don't know. But anyways, the conspiracy theory is this. The reason why food prices have gone up is because human trafficking has gone down. And human trafficking was a source of meat in America. Sounds disgusting. And it started off so lighthearted. You're joking about pig rectums. What? Yeah, well, here's the thing. It is shocking to think there's more slaves today now in the world than there ever were at any other time in the world. Like, if you took all the slaves from today, they would vastly outnumber all the slaves at the height of the slave trade. More slaves today. And the conspiracy theory basically is, it's not that the meat industry was started to hide the bodies of humans in the food chain, but as human trafficking grew, exploded really, and you would have people trafficked for all sorts of reasons, whether you're getting trafficked to straight up be a slave, working for no money, you're not like a maid where you get paid and you paid to come over the border yourself. A lot of human trafficking and prostitution. In fact, nowadays, I don't know how long this has been the case, but nowadays, when you try to get with a prostitute, and if you get caught, you get charged with facilitating human trafficking. This idea that you have so many people being human trafficked, and when they reach the end of their usefulness, they were then killed, but you can only bury or burn so many bodies. So then the easiest way to dispose of them was to turn them into meat. And now you have all this meat, and what do you do with it? It's still 180 pounds of dead body. Well, put it into the food processing. Because if you have, let's say you alone, your organization is moving 10,000 people a year across the border to make them slaves. They're going to age out. You're a good person. Okay, it's not you. I don't want to say this about you. This other guy standing behind you, I was pointing at him. He's not a good person when they don't fulfill what their goal was. If you're bringing over women to work at a chain of nail salons and they're constantly being forced to move between different salons as new ones come in, once they stop being able to do what they do, you kill them. And what do you do with 130 pound? What do you do with a 120 pound problem? Bury it, burn it, or throw it into the meat processing, and you could be doing, not you, the guy behind you could be doing thousands of these a year. And this idea that for a long time, the reason why meat prices in America, and this is a conspiracy theory, we're putting on our conspiracy caps for this one. The reason why food prices were pretty low in America was because, let's just say, 10% of the meat that we eat is actually human remains. But even if you had it as low as 5% or 2%, that still would be a cost-cutting measure. But since there's less human trafficking than there used to be, because it's still a big problem, but it has slowed down, there's less free meat. And in fact, you could even say the human traffickers may be paying corrupt meat distribution plants, paying them to get rid of the bodies. So the meatpacking plant would be making money to get rid of the body, plus they could sell the meat at a lower price because there's less meat that they had to buy or they had to process, right? Some of it's human remains. It's interesting because you read that and you go, well, that's kind of disgusting. It sounds gross. It sounds like Soylent Green. Is it possible? You would have to have a pretty, I want to say like advanced organization to do that, but at the end of the day, in the Bay Area, I remember, I never encountered this myself because I used to work at a crematory for a summer, but we would know in the Bay Area that sometimes, because these places, a lot of these crematories will run really late into the night, if not 24 hours a day, usually not, but you may have to pick up a body at 1 or 2 in the morning, and you always had people there, not all the time, but you had people there late at night, basically. And what was happening was you'd have a mortician or you'd have a crematory worker at the crematory there late at night, and some guys come in with guns and a body, and they tell you to burn it. If you don't burn it, they're going to kill you. So you burn it, and then they leave. So you don't need a super advanced organization. I mean, obviously, you would have to be doing a ton of these. But let's say, for it to make sense, if you were just throwing 100 bodies into the food supply every month, that really wouldn't bring food prices down. But if you were putting 10,000, 50,000, whatever, humans into this processing plant, that would result in lower food prices. You go, Jason, this is ridiculous. You say, as you're sitting there, you're the CEO of McDonald's, and you're also a human trafficker, because I was pointing at you. There is no one behind you. Obviously, I read this, I go, that's pretty disgusting, and then I'm kind of reading the responses. What I thought was interesting was the guy who posted it said, pretty much every fast food restaurant serves human meat in their food, and they know it. Not the individual McDonald's workers, but the top brass. Again, I'm not saying this is true. This guy is. He says he worked at a meat distribution plant, family owned a meat packing plant. He said pretty much all the fast food restaurants know that they serve human meat. The big exceptions are In-N-Out and Chick-fil-A, as well as Costco and Sam's Club. Their meat has no human meat in it. But Walmart and Kroger, he says, has human meat. When you go to buy a great value hamburger, 20 hamburger patties for $20 or whatever, human meat. Now, not every single patty would have like a toenail in it. There's just enough people going into the food supply that it brought the prices down, but now there's less people going in. So the prices have raised. You go, wait a second, Jason, it doesn't make any sense because the price of food didn't go up just for meat. The price of food went up for everything. I went to go get some corn on the cob the other day, or I bought a bag of sugar snap peas or whatever. It was more expensive than I used to. How do you explain that? Well, that is inflation. That probably is inflation. The humans weren't turned into sugar snap peas. That is inflation. But the meat thing is all human. I thought it was interesting, too, because, obviously people are saying that doesn't make sense. That's kind of disgusting. It doesn't make sense. Is this a conspiracy theory I believe in? It's no, I don't. I will say it's plausible. It's plausible. It's not something that I ascribe to myself, but I do eat a lot of meat. And I don't want to think that I'm eating human trafficking victims. But I actually don't even really like to think that I'm eating a cow that probably would have been happier out on a pasture. But instead, he's locked in a cage for most of his life. And then I eat him. That doesn't make me feel great either. So I don't want to eat humans or animals, but I do eat animals. I know how bad it is. I know how sad it is. But I would say I'm not one of those guys who says, oh, I don't care what happens to people. I only care what happens to animals. I could watch a kid get run over by a bulldozer and I laugh. But if I see a kitten get his tail stepped on. It makes me so mad I want to punch the internet. I don't know what the mechanism is behind that. I see that comment pop up from time to time. People have told me that in real life. It's always very odd to me. I'm not one of those people. It doesn't mean I love killing animals. I don't love killing cows. But I think it would be more awful if someone said, you have a choice, Jason. You can eat this baby cow or regular-sized cow, just a cow, or you have to eat this human trafficking victim. And there's like a woman sitting over there, and I make eye contact with her. Like, obviously, I'm eating the cow. 100%. 100%. And there's no options. You can't kill yourself. You can't eat yourself. You can't eat the person asking that question. If you were forced to choose between eating an animal, eating a cow, or eating a human trafficking victim, and you don't have to eat them raw. So you're like, well, I would eat the woman, but, it has to be cooked right. You'd have a delicious hamburger from the cow, or you'd have a delicious hamburger made from a human trafficking victim. Obviously, you're going to eat the cow burger. I think everybody would. I would be very suspect of anyone who chose the human trafficking victim. So that's the most absurd hypothetical question you've ever asked. And you ask a lot of weird ones. Why was I even talking about that? Oh, basically, like, it's sad that I eat animals. That makes me sad, but it would make me sadder if I found out I was actually eating humans. Obviously. But Aaron C., let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the world-famous Carpenter Copter. We're leaving behind the meatpacking plant. Why don't you fly us all the way out to the Netherlands? Fascinating story. Just jump right into it. No preamble for this one. It's the year 1987, and we're in the Netherlands. Specifically, we're in the town of Old Pekela. Old Pekela, it's a province of Groningen. It's the May 3rd, 4th weekend of 1987, when a 5-year-old boy in town, this is a small town, population 8,000 people. It's a very small town. On this weekend, you had a unnamed 5-year-old boy and his unnamed 4-year-old friend. The 5-year-old boy and the 4-year-old are out playing one day, and the 5-year-old boy takes a stick and sticks it inside the 4-year-old's butthole. Being a bully? Just the game? Or was the 5-year-old acting out? Was this some sort of bizarre, I'm getting the power back for myself moment for a child who was being abused himself? But the 4-year-old, when he comes home, his parents, obviously he took the stick out. He wasn't walking down the street with the stick in his butthole, just so we're clear. But when he gets home, his parents find blood in his underwear. And despite the 4-year-old going, oh, no, it was Billy. That wasn't his real name. We don't know his real name. But Billy stuck a stick up my butthole. The parents took the 4-year-old to the doctor, and the doctor takes a look at this 4-year-old boy. And he hears the whole thing about the 5-year-old sticking the stick up the kid's butt and all that stuff. Well, the doctor, he actually suspects that this young boy was subject to sexual abuse, the 4-year-old. And he doesn't think it was a stick at all. The parents said it was a stick, because they're going off what their son says. But the doctor's just suspicious about the whole thing. So he calls the police and says, hey, I saw a boy today that his parents, and even he said a stick got shoved up his rectum, but I think it could have been sexual abuse. You might want to check in on this, right? Could it be the parents? Could it all be this made-up thing with the stick? But then word starts to get out around town about what happened between these two boys. About the one boy possibly being the victim of sexual assault and no stick involved. People start talking amongst each other in this small town. They know that the police are investigating it as a possible sexual assault. And a lot of these parents, because they were so concerned, they would sit down with their own children and go, hey guys, this is, might be an uncomfortable conversation for you, but me and mom, we need to ask you these questions. Have you been touched in any sort of way that made you feel uncomfortable? And these conversations were happening all over town now. Parents talking to their own kids to find out if their children had also been sexually assaulted. I want to say this too before, because we're going to start reading a lot of quotes. This was great investigative journalism by an author named Reindeer Smith for RTV Noord. It's a Netherlands news website. And he grew up with this, right? He didn't live in this town, but it becomes such a huge scandal. He knew about it since he was a young kid himself. This goes on for generations, this story I'm about to tell you. So even in his article, he's like, I'm learning new things, and I don't even know how to feel about this story anymore. But back to the narrative. Reindeer Smith said, nowadays, we have very specialized questions to ask possible child victims of sex crimes because we know how easy it is to mislead them or to a kid may give you the story they think you want to hear. And like I had the father say, has anyone ever touched you in an uncomfortable way? That's a very broad question. Because a lot of parents don't, or just adults in general, teachers and police, they have specialized police that ask these questions now too, but you don't really want to talk about that subject matter with a kid. So you'll use very general phrases like anything that made you feel uncomfortable. And that could be anything from sexual assault to you were in a grocery store and someone put their hand on your shoulder to kind of move you out of the way so they could get their cart by. You shouldn't do that, obviously. You shouldn't touch another person, let alone a kid. But uncomfortable can mean 100 different things. Now you have to ask questions, and I don't know what the exact questions are, but you have to make sure you're not leading them on. When's the last time your father hit you? When's the last time your mother touched you? Because then they go, well, there wasn't a first time, but if he's asking me about the last time, then maybe very specialized questions. Reindeer goes, we have those questions now. We know how to talk to children who we suspect have been abused, but back then parents were not doing that. They were just asking questions, and the kids were, here's the debate. I hate to keep going off of the main storyline, but all over town, these kids began to tell their parents that, yes, they were being sexually molested. Was it because the questions were phrased wrong, or was it because it was really happening? It was that first weekend in May where they had the 5-year-old and the 4-year-old boy and the stick in the butthole. Within a week, 10 families came forward, contacted the police, and said, my child has told me that they have been sexually molested. A week after that, a town meeting is called. The parents of Pekela are invited to this meeting, and at that time, they are told by the authorities at this meeting, there is a rash of sexual assaults happening in this city. The children are telling the truth, and no one in here, well, we do, because we're the police, we're the mayor, we're the city council people. We kind of know, but none of you know. This is what they told this audience full of concerned parents. None of you guys know the true scope of what is going on in this town. It's way more than 10 families. By June 6th, a local newspaper called the Nieuwsblad van het Noorden ran this headline. Quote, imagine reading this in the newspaper. It's terrifying. Quote, child molesters dressed as clowns, 50 children sexually assaulted in Old Pekela. Unquote. Now, that was I believe, a regional newspaper. That wasn't the newspaper just for this town. So you had people who didn't live in this town now reading that. 50 children have been molested in this town by people dressed as clowns. Which is the more shocking part of that headline? And I'm not trying to make a joke either. But one is just an innate fear of the worst side of humanity. Someone preying on children for their own sexual gratification. But the other one evokes some of the most creepy imagery. I personally don't have a problem with clowns, but I know a lot of people do. And I don't have a problem with clowns, but if they were molesting kids, having that idea, having that vision in my head of perverts dressed as clowns and enticing children, it is far creepier. The visual is far darker when those two things are combined together. And that is what these kids had come forth and said. There were people dressed as clowns in the town, and they would lure them away out of their front yard while they're at the park, riding a bike from school. The allegations were all made from only one age group, children 3 through 6, 3 years old to 6 years old. Older kids were not reporting this at all. Teenagers, preteens, they had nothing. They go, I have no idea what's going on. Nothing's happened to me. My friends have never mentioned anything. In fact, we've never seen any clowns. But the kids who were coming forward were aged 3 to 6, and they were saying there were clowns in town that were sexually molesting them. This quickly becomes a national news story in the Netherlands. And because the imagery is so bizarre, it becomes an international story. Now, there were some kids that said, yes, I was molested, but it didn't involve a clown. They didn't really understand the clown thing. They go, yeah, no, I was molested, but not by a clown. While other kids were like, no, it was a clown. 100% there was a clown involved. When you looked at the victims' stories, sometimes they were taken to a house. But other times, other kids would say, no, we were taken to a house over on that side of town. And the third kid would go, well, no, it was the house over on this side of town. And when the police would ask, how did the clown show up? And they'd be like, well, he drove a big black car. But then another kid could go, oh, no, he had like a small green car. While a third may say, well, he just had like a truck, a pickup truck. And the police who are investigating all of this, they're taking it super seriously. There's 10 detectives who are assigned simply to this case. Obviously, the scope and the damage is so high. The scope is huge and the damage is, horrible. Catch these people. But they go, there's no through line. Not even every kid agrees that clowns were involved. Some of the kids said it was filmed, while others said it was not. And again, the police, they just go, there's nothing connecting all of this. But they kept investigating it. They took every report seriously. But then, some of the allegations begin to change. But then, we had 10 kids reported, and then we had 50 kids reported to be sexually assaulted in this town. By the end of this, 150 children came forward and said they were molested in the town of Old Pekela. Did the details match? Some did, some didn't. But as we're getting more and more people coming forward, that's when we have kids going, well, I got picked up by a clown and he got me into his truck and then he took me to a place and they made me watch them sacrifice a human baby. So now we're getting to the satanic panic. These kids are saying, not only was I sexually molested, I watched these people do these satanic ceremonies while I was being molested. And the police, as they're doing all of this stuff, they start to think, okay, now they kind of thought there was probably more than one suspect, but now they're like, there has to be more than one suspect. There has to be a group of these guys. The police then begin to look at the people of Old Pekela, specifically the people in power. Who are the people who could cover all of this up? Who are the people with enough money or power to not only get away with this, but to be so brazen about it that they figured they would get away with it? So the detectives silently start investigating politically powerful people in town. I mean, it's a small town, but you're still going to have things like a mayor and a city council. You're still going to have wealthy people who have been in that town for generations. The people streets are named after. But now it's getting out of control. And the people of Old Pekela are watching this. And you see a dividing line cut through that town. Some of them say, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that happened here. We've always heard stories about crazy things happening in other countries. But here, our children aren't safe. And now I'm hearing stories about sacrificed babies. Like, it was bad enough the clowns. But then you had a whole other group of people in Old Pekela who go, I don't think this is really happening. I don't think any of it's real. They believe none of the allegations, and they definitely don't believe the baby stuff. They definitely don't believe 150 kids. They don't believe in the clowns because no adult ever saw a clown in town. So you basically have a dividing line through that town. Some believed the kids and some thought it was all made up. So what happens is eventually the city goes, listen, we need to get a handle on this. Because this is, listen, if it's true, we got to get to the bottom of it. But as more and more people started thinking this isn't real, and it's doing more damage to the kids, because if this isn't real and you're telling them it's real, it's messing with their heads. It's giving a terrible name to this town, and we shouldn't have a witch hunt. The police shouldn't be investigating people for a crime that never happened, and now they're just investigating everybody. So eventually, the local authorities contacted a local psychiatrist named Garrett Mick to investigate these allegations. So they go, finally a professional, because that hadn't happened. You took your kids to the doctor called the police. And since then, it had been parents talking to their kids and police officers talking to the kids. The city council or the town commissioner or whoever said, we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to find out if these allegations are true. Because a lot of people are saying they aren't, and they're kind of making sense. So they get this local psychiatrist, Garrett Mick, quoting from this article by Reindeer Smith, quote, the assumption was that Mick would refute the stories. But the opposite happened. In a press conference, an emotional Mick declared that the children's stories are true, and the parents and the children in Pekela were extremely happy that someone with authority believed and supported them. Unquote. So it is on at this point. You wanted to bring in an expert to talk to these kids? He did. And he's backing us up. But again, even as psychiatrists, there are special tactics and special words they use to talk to children who you believe are victims of sexual assault, or really any abuse, but we're specifying that for this podcast. Looking back, because this case has been analyzed for decades, one of the follies of Garrett Mick's belief was he felt back then, and really felt it as far as I can tell. He's passed away by now, but he never really retracted his investigation. Garrett Mick definitely back then felt this was kind of his guiding light. Why would children make this up? That's why he believed them. That was the core thing. He walked in there, and when the kid started talking to him, he goes, well, why would he be making this up? This kid's obviously telling the truth. So he believed every single story that he heard. Now, children do make things up. Adults make things up. And that's why you need to have those specialized investigators and those specialized questions in just the right environment. Because you can ask the wrong question, and then you could be investigating a parent for sexual assault or domestic violence or whatever, and it never happened. The kid didn't really even make it up maliciously or make it up for attention or anything. It's not like a bad kid wanting to get someone in trouble, so making up a story. It just happens. Adults do it with police all the time as well. You tell the police what you think they want to hear. And sometimes you go to prison because of it, because you end up implicating yourself in a crime you didn't commit. This whole saga lasts a year and a half. The town is divided. Half the town thinks the other half is dumb, while that half thinks the other half is in on a satanic conspiracy, or at the very least turning a blind eye to true torment and true suffering. But after a year and a half, 150 suspected victims, 10 police officers investigating it, as well as a ton of reporters as well, 0 arrests. at the end, it was basically treated as they made it up. The kids made it up. But is that true? It's really interesting. In America, the term satanic panic, as catchy as it is, and it has a little rhyme, and I like that, it is used to dismiss out of hand all sorts of horrible crimes. And as a true crime and paranormal enthusiast, even back then, I remember reading a book, a true crime book that was talking about satanic crimes. That might have been the name of it. In the book, it said a run-of-the-mill child molester will often include satanic or absurd imagery or rituals in their molestation, specifically so the child will not be believed if they ever tell. This guy worked with police officers and he traveled the country talking to them about satanic crimes. And even he goes, a lot of it's not even satanic. They're not actually trying to invoke the Dark Lord or anything like that. It's a cover. It's a smoke screen. Because if your kid comes home and says, the librarian molested me, you'll probably believe it. You should, right? Until there's evidence otherwise. I would. If a kid comes home and goes, the librarian's molested me, she's been molesting me for the past 3 years, that accusation is going to be given a lot more credit than if that kid says, the librarian's been molesting me, she's a witch. She told me she cast a spell on me and says I have to have sex with her. Otherwise, my parents are going to die. And every time I go over, she draws this satanic symbol on her wall and she cracks a bloody egg on it. And then she molests me. People in town, people in the media will not treat the second one. They'll go, that is not true. That kid's making that up. So when you call something a satanic panic, it's very easy for people to go, it's probably not true. It's an easy way to dismiss all the allegations. You have people going, it's all made up, it's just a satanic panic. And that's kind of where we're at today. Reindeer Smith said, every couple years a book comes out, finally showing the truth behind what happened in Old Pekela. Only for another book to come out 2 years after that, saying, no, that book was wrong. I know what really happened in this town. A couple years later, another book. No. I've finally revealed the truth. He goes, tons of articles, tons of retrospectives, books written about this, interviewing people, analyzing all the information. And even now, journalists don't know what really happened in this town. They don't. They cannot figure it out. Very, very interesting because we talk about powerful people covering things up. And this is, Reindeer Smith, when he wrote this article, he's not as conspiratorial minded as I am. When I read this passage, I thought, well, that kind of makes me think there were powerful people involved. This is talking about the what's happened after the investigation. Quote, Mick was criticized, the Garrett Mick, the psychiatrist they brought in, quote, Mick was criticized in the press and vilified by fellow scientists and died a few years later as a bitter man of cardiac arrest. The local general practitioner who examined the first children, the guy, the stick in the butthole doctor, the local GP who had examined the first children and who was the driving force behind the abuse story, ended his own life. The Pekela clown affair claimed countless victims. Families and families were divided into believers and non-believers. And in order to keep the peace, the affair was kept quiet for longer and more often. So, I think, was the general practitioner killed? Suicides are fairly easy to fake, and they're also quite difficult to fake. It really depends on the mode of suicide. But, again, I'm a conspiracy theorist, so I read something like that and I go, oh, it's payback. I mean, again, a non-conspiracy theorist can go, well, he did start this entire thing that half the people believe never happened, and they probably hate his guts, and he probably got a lot of angry phone calls and people calling him a loop or troublemaker, all sorts of stuff. And then on the other hand, he may also feel bad that he tried his best to get it out, and in the end, no one was arrested, so he took his life because of that. He could have been bullied into suicide. He could have been just heartbroken over all of it. Or it's possible he was murdered. It's really interesting, and I know we're going long, but it's really interesting because Reindeer Smith, he has investigated this story, and he's written about it over the years because it's a big story. This case keeps coming back up in the media. But he also, broadened his research out. And he's hearing about these other towns where it wasn't clown abuse. Let me read you this quote. This is quite disturbing, but I think this kind of shows what he's building to. He said, there's a village north of Groningen. So it's not Old Pekela, but it's another town. And he wrote, quote, on warm summer evenings, the neighbors closed their own windows to keep out the moans and screams of the neighboring children. Let me start over again. On warm summer evenings, the neighbors closed their own windows to keep out the moans and screams of the neighboring children who were being abused for money. Oh, yes, said a lady I interviewed at the nursery school when she dropped off her own children. Oh, yes, every family has its ups and downs, right? In short, half the village knew about it. Unquote. So he goes, you had this going on in another town. People were selling their own kids as prostitutes, and the town knew. Every family has its troubles. He also talked about in 2010, in Amsterdam, there was a man named Robert Mikkelsen, 27 years old. He was a babysitter and employee at a daycare center, who was eventually arrested and convicted for abusing more than 80 children himself. Single perpetrator, 80 children. And he also made child pornography with these kids. And Reindeer Smith comments on that story. He says, quote, and who tells me that in 1987 there was no Robert M. active in Pekela, and that there was indeed sexual abuse of a group of children? In short, the clown affair of Pekela is an unsolvable case that will probably never be clarified. Unquote. And that is a very interesting argument. He goes, here's just two examples of crazy people, horrible people, one guy, 80 kids. And then you have this other town in the Netherlands where, hey, people willing to pay for sex with your kid, you need the money, and half the town knows about it. He goes, you can't tell me that something didn't happen in Old Pekela. Something didn't happen, but we will never know. But you do go, well, it's very possible. The only time this story really veers into the realm of unbelievability is the clowns and the Satanist stuff. Even to me, I am a conspiracy theorist. I'm a big true crime guy. And even to me, the visuals are far darker, yes. But it does sound ridiculous. It does. I think the problem is that shouldn't be the end of the conversation, and you should go, okay, well, you still investigate it. You don't just go, it's just some kid, it's some Bible-thumping Baptist minister who got these kids whipped up in a frenzy. It's funny, I think for me personally, putting my cards on the table, I'm kind of there with Reindeer Smith. I think something did happen. The initial group of kids, probably, the 150, that giant group, you started off with 10, then you had 50, so 40 more, and then you had another 100 kids come forward. It was, if I remember correctly, because I'm reading this article, it was translated from, English or the Netherlandese, Dutch, I think might be the language, but to English. If I remember correctly, the allegations of the saint worshiping came in that third wave of kids. And that is where you can start to go, how many of those are telling the truth? I know that sounds really bad. But by this time, you have all this media hype. All this media frenzy. It's an international news story. And you may have people making up details in that third wave. But the first groups of kids, listen, it's horrible, but it's totally possible that 10 kids in a town of 8,000 people got molested. And it's unfortunately very possible that even 150 kids in a town of 8,000 got molested. But once you start to get into the sacrificing baby thing, it does make you pause. And the clown thing especially, because no adults saw these clowns. But we know how mass hysteria works with adults, and we know how it works with kids. So I do think there is a lot. I think something happened to some of the kids there. And it's possible it happened to all 150. I don't know. But it's interesting because I just came across this story. It was posted on Reddit by a guy going by the name Adolf Titler. And I had never heard of this before. So, if I dug into it, I might, if I read some of these books, but I probably doubt they're in English, I might change my view. There might be way more information saying, no, it's false. It was always false. But even the people who lived there, even the people who lived through it don't know. And like Reindeer said, they stopped talking about it in town. He goes, it divided the town so much. He said, in order to keep the peace, the affair was kept quiet for longer and more often. So over the years, maybe they would have a book come out and people in town would be talking about it. The sides would be drawn up again, and then they go, listen, we're never going to know the answer. And then a couple years would pass and people would return to, I don't want to say normal, but they would stop speaking about it until the next book came out or the next news article or the next TV special. And then they'd be talking about it again. But as time goes on, it was happening less and less and less. It's a fascinating story. It truly is on that border of true crime and conspiracy. Who was involved? One person? A group of the rich and powerful? We see that happen. The Mark Dutroux story. I'll put that episode in the show notes. I'll make a list of all of the Satanic Panic episodes we'll do. I'll put them in the show notes. But nothing? Do you think nothing happened? Do you think some of it was legit? One perpetrator, a group of perpetrators, powerful people in town covering it up, a group of just weirdos? Were there really clowns? Like, again, that'd be an easy gimmick to pull off. It would. And then when kids said it, you'd be like, well, you're making it up. You're just making it up. You wouldn't say that to the kid, but a police officer might think that. He goes, well, it's kind of weird that he says this happened and that just happened, a scene just like that happened in The Conjuring or something. And I think the kid's actually all messed up, been given the wrong questions by his parents, and he saw The Conjuring movie, and he's describing a scene from that movie, but it involves sex. I think he's making it up. Because that really will determine whether or not it gets investigated, right? A cop can go, I don't think there's anything here. And then he can just let the file sit on his desk until the people stop calling him. So, fascinating. I'm curious as to what you guys think. Real? Fake? Some of it real, some of it fake? Really clowns involved? Were they satanic rituals? Were there satanic rituals that were fake, like I was saying, that there really was no Satanism, but it was just the pomp and majesty of that? And we can debate about it. I'd love to see your emails. I'd love to see your YouTube comments. But it's funny because for us, we do this story, we talk about it briefly online, and then we go on to the next story. We go on with the rest of our day, the rest of our lives. But in the town of Old Pekela, the story still persists. To this day, people are still suspicious of the neighbors living right across the street. They just don't talk about it anymore. Just because they don't talk about it doesn't mean that they have forgiven or forgotten the Pekela clown affair. That all started when a warm May weekend back in 1987 turned the city against each other. DeadRabbitRadio at gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is at DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm so glad you listened to it today. Have a great one, guys.